Tyrael was created from the crystal arch, the source of all angels in the high heavens. Like all members of the Anger's Council, he embodied one of Anu's core virtues. In Tyrael's case, he was the personification of justice. The Anger's Council ruled heaven, each member representing a different principle. Imperius embodied valor, Auriel represented hope, Ithirael guided fate, and Malthael once stood for wisdom. Tyrael was the judge, ensuring fairness and punishment where necessary. But justice is not only about laws and rulings. It requires action. It requires force. While Auriel sought peace and Ithirael studied the flow of destiny, Tyrael took a different path. He became a warrior, bringing his version of justice through battle. As demons threatened creation, the council debated how to respond. Some believed in waiting, others in preserving the balance. Tyrael refused to watch from the sidelines. He took up his sword, Eldrin, and carried justice into war. This was the beginning of his long fight against the forces of hell. The war between heaven and hell was eternal. For countless ages, angels and demons clashed across the planes of existence, neither side able to claim victory. This was the eternal conflict, and at its center was Tyrael. As the Archangel of Justice, Tyrael became one of heaven's greatest champions, known for his unwavering pursuit of order. His name alone was enough to bring fear to the demons of the burning hells. Alongside his fellow angels, Tyrael fought in battles beyond counting. He and Imperius saved each other's lives many times, though their views on justice were often at odds. One such moment came when they captured Diablo, the Lord of Terror. Tyrael and Auriel argued for imprisonment, believing that execution would be meaningless. Diablo would simply reform in hell. Imperius refused to listen and struck Diablo down, acting on his own idea of justice. In another battle, Tyrael had Asmodan, the Lord of Sin, at his mercy. He was ready to land the final blow, but his ally called for help. Tyrael chose to aid his comrade, allowing Asmodan to escape. The choice was not without cost. Victory had been within reach. Now, not all wounds in war come from the enemy. Tyrael's most trusted lieutenant, Iswell, was taken during an assault on the Hellforge. He was lost in the burning hells, his fate unknown. His brother-in-arms, Inarius, questioned the war itself, believing it was without purpose. Tyrael refused to accept that view. The fight against hell was not about winning, it was about doing what was right. Then, something unexpected happened. The World Stone, an artifact tied to the foundation of reality, vanished. Both heaven and hell accused the other of its theft, but neither had taken it. A third force had interfered. The war between heaven and hell was all that Tyrael had ever known. Every battle had been fought with one purpose, to prevent the spread of hell's corruption. But there was another world, hidden from both heaven and hell, a place that should not have existed. This world was called Sanctuary. It was not created by the gods, nor was it shaped by fate. It was forged in secret by angels and demons who had abandoned the eternal war. Among them was Inarius, once a warrior of heaven, and Lilith, daughter of Mephisto. Together, they created a world outside of the war, free from divine rule. But they also created something new, the Nephilim, the offspring of angels and demons. When heaven discovered Sanctuary, Tyrael was sent to judge it. His first instinct was clear, and this was all a big mistake. The Nephilim were unnatural. They were powerful beyond measure, and if left unchecked, they could be stronger than both angels and demons. Tyrael saw only one solution. They had to be destroyed. To weaken them, he turned mortals against one another. He manipulated a warrior named Achilleos, trying to force him to strike against his own allies. But Achilleos resisted. This was Tyrael's first warning. Humanity did not bend as easily as demons. Eventually, a battle broke out, with heaven and hell both descending upon the Sanctuary. The Nephilim, now called the Edirum, fought back, led by a man named Uldyssian. His power grew beyond control, threatening to unmake the world itself. But instead of ruling, instead of claiming godhood, Uldyssian chose to sacrifice himself. With his last act, he restored balance and saved Sanctuary. Tyrael had called them abominations, but no abomination would willingly give its life for others. The Anger's Council gathered to decide Sanctuary's fate. Imperius demanded destruction. Humanity was a threat that could not be allowed to grow. Auriel and Ithuriel argued the opposite. They saw potential, a chance for something greater than the eternal war. Malthael remained silent. That left one vote. Now everybody expected Tyrael to side with Imperius. It was the logical choice. It was the safe choice. Instead, Tyrael did something no one had foreseen. He voted to spare humanity. Sanctuary would remain. Its people would be free. Free to choose between good and evil. Free to forge their own fate. It was a choice that would shape everything to come. Tyrael had fought to spare humanity, but his battle was not over. Though the Anger's Council had chosen to leave Sanctuary untouched, Hell had not abandoned its plans. The primevals, Diablo, Mephisto, and Baal, had been exiled from their own realm, cast out by the lesser evils, in a struggle for power. But they were not defeated. They turned their attention to Sanctuary, seeking to corrupt and control humanity. Tyrael saw what others did not. The primevals had operated in secret for decades, influencing mortals from the shadows. If heaven discovered the full extent of their presence, the council might reconsider its decisions, and Sanctuary could be destroyed. Tyrael chose not to reveal the danger. Instead, he acted alone. Knowing he could not fight this battle himself, though, he created, or organized, the Horadrim, an order of mortal sorcerers and warriors. He gifted them knowledge and weapons, forging them into a force capable of hunting the prime evils. He also crafted the Soul Stones, magical artifacts formed from the World Stone itself. These stones, he believed, could imprison the prime evils and remove their influence over Sanctuary. And so the hunt began. Mephisto was the first to fall. The Horadrim sealed his essence within a soul stone and buried it deep beneath the Zakarum city of Karast. Next was Baal, the Lord of Destruction. But the battle did not go as planned. His soul stone was damaged in the fight, no longer able to contain him. In desperation, the Horadrim leader Tyrael offered himself as a vessel. Tyrael drove the broken soul stone into his flesh and bound him in chains beneath the sands of Aranok, where he would battle Baal's essence for eternity. Only Diablo remained. The Lord of Terror was the most elusive, but after a decade of searching, the Horadrim finally trapped him. His soul stone was buried beneath a monastery in Kanduras, hidden away where none would find it. Tyrael had succeeded. The primevals were contained, their influence on Sanctuary severed. Heaven remained unaware, and the world was safe for now. But something was wrong. The soul stones, meant to imprison, began to corrupt. The very objects designed to hold back evil were conduits for it. Over time, Mephisto's influence seeped into the Zakarum clergy, twisting its leaders. Diablo's power reached the minds of men, bending them to his will. The corruption spread slowly, unnoticed at first, until it was too late. Tyrael had won a battle, but the war was far from over, and he had a part to play in this. In time, the Horadrim faded. Their victories had been forgotten, their knowledge lost. The primevals had been sealed, but their influence had never truly disappeared. It was only a matter of time before they returned. Diablo was the first. His power seeped into the mind of Aiden, a prince of Kanduras. The demon twisted him into a vessel, a puppet that would carry his will across Sanctuary. As the Dark Wanderer, Aiden moved east, seeking to free his brothers. Baal was still trapped, bound to the body of Tyrael. Tyrael appeared, hoping to stop his release. He fought against the Dark Wanderer, but another was present. Marius, a simple man, caught in something far greater than himself. Manipulated by Diablo, Marius removed the Soul Stone from Tyrael, allowing Baal to break free. Tyrael had no choice but to act quickly. He reached out to Marius, commanding him to take Baal's Soul Stone to Karast. There, at the Temple of Light, he could destroy it in the Hellforge before it was too late. But Tyrael never saw if his warning was followed. Baal trapped him within a binding stone, sealing him away. For a time, Tyrael was powerless. He could do nothing but watch as the prime evils moved unchecked. Diablo continued east, freeing Mephisto from his prison beneath Karast. The two brothers then set their sights on Hell itself. But not all hope was lost. a group of mortal heroes, guided by the wisdom of Deckard Cain, sought to stop the Lords of Hell. They discovered Tyrael's prison and shattered the chains that bound him. He was free once more, but weakened. His strength had been drained, and he could not face the prime evils directly. Instead, he guided the heroes to the Pandemonium Fortress, the last stronghold before Hell itself. There he revealed hard truths. The fallen angel Iswell, remember him? Once Tyrael's closest ally, had been turned by Hell's corruption. It was Iswell who had given the prime evils the knowledge they needed to twist the soul stones to their advantage. Now there was only one way to stop them. Their soul stones had to be destroyed. The heroes defeated Mephisto, then Diablo soon after. They triumphed, destroying both soul stones. But one still remained. Marius had failed. He had not taken Baal's soul stone to the Hellforge. Instead, he had wandered, lost and broken. In time, Baal found him, reclaimed his essence, and marched towards Mount Arreat. His goal was not simple destruction. He sought the World Stone, the foundation of Sanctuary itself. The heroes pursued him, and Tyrael did what he could. Weakened, he could not stand against Baal directly. Instead, he transported the heroes to Harrogate, where they made their final stand. Baal was defeated, but it was too late. The World Stone had been corrupted. Tyrael had studied its nature for ages. He knew what would happen if it remained intact. There was only one choice left. Tyrael raised Eldarin, his sacred blade, and cast it into the World Stone. The impact shattered the ancient artifact, unleashing a surge of energy that consumed the mountain and the lands around it. Arreat was no more. The World Stone was gone. Tyrael's body vanished in the explosion. His light disappeared from the world. Sanctuary had been saved, but its future was now uncertain. The destruction of the World Stone meant that nothing held the forces of heaven and hell back. The barriers that had once protected humanity were gone. Tyrael had acted in the name of justice, but for the first time, he would not be there to see what his judgment had brought. When the World Stone shattered, so did Tyrael. His body was gone, his form lost in the explosion, but he did not die. He found himself within the remains of the World Stone, a fractured realm where reality itself was unstable. Here he was not alone. Baal's spirit lingered, trying to reform. Tyrael fought to contain him, but the realm itself favored the demon. The World Stone's power had been poisoned by the eternal conflict, and Tyrael could not hold his ground forever. Time moved differently in this place. Years passed. Though Tyrael felt no hunger, no pain, only struggle. He was eventually freed when a mortal, the Shard Seeker, entered the realm and challenged Baal. The demon, now whole again, collapsed the realm and escaped its sanctuary, only to be defeated shortly after. Tyrael survived, but he was changed. His form was weak, his connection to the heavens distant. Slowly, he reformed in Pandemonium, the battleground between heaven and hell. For 20 years, he existed in isolation, regaining his strength. But something was different. Heaven had not called him home. When Tyrael finally returned to the High of Heavens, he summoned Eldarin to his side, restoring a part of himself. But his return was not met with celebration. To the Anger's Council, he was no longer the same. His destruction of the World Stone had left Sanctuary exposed, and some believed he had risked the balance of all creation. Tyrael saw things differently, though. The eternal conflict had raged for countless ages, and neither side had won. He had watched humanity grow, struggle, and endure despite the forces working against them. He knew that the heavens could not ignore them any longer. The council refused to listen, though. Imperius, the Archangel of Valor, held fast to heaven's laws. Angels could not interfere in the mortal world. Tyrael argued that without aid, humanity would be destroyed, but his words meant little. Faced with their inaction, Tyrael made his choice. He reached to his back and tore off his wings. The glow of his angelic form faded. His body became flesh. His immortality was gone. Tyrael had done what no angel had ever done before. He had chosen to become immortal. He fell from the high heavens, descending into the world he once sought to judge. His purpose remained unchanged. Justice must be upheld. But for the first time, he would walk among those he had fought to protect. Tyrael fell from the heavens like a comet, his body no longer bound by the power of the Ark. He struck the earth near Tristram, shattering the land around him. The force of this descent scattered Eldarin, his sacred blade, into 3 fragments. As he lay in the crater, weakened and disoriented, something else stirred. His arrival had awakened the dead, and the restless spirits of Tristram's past began to rise. Mortality weighed on him in ways he had never imagined. He felt hunger, exhaustion, and pain for the first time. His memories were broken, his purpose unclear. He was found by a group of mortal heroes, that's you by the way, who brought him to New Tristram, where he was placed under the care of Deckard Cain. Cain, skeptical of the stranger's survival, tried to understand his origins. Tyrael could not explain himself. He could only recall glimpses, flashes of light, a sense of urgency, the fragments of a sword that needed to be restored. The heroes ventured out to retrieve Eldrin's shattered pieces, while Tyrael remained behind, struggling with his new reality. Sleep overtook him for the first time, an unfamiliar experience filled with strange visions. He had once believed he understood mortals, but living as one was far different from observing them. The heroes recovered 2 of the fragments, but before they could secure the 3rd, they were attacked by the sorceress Magda and her cult. She sought the sword's power, and in her pursuit, she took Tyrael, Leia, and Cain captive. In a cruel act, Magda forced Cain to repair the sword, then mortally wounded him before escaping with Tyrael. The heroes eventually rescued Tyrael from his captors. In the moment he reclaimed Eldrin, his strength returned, and with it, his memories. He remembered his mission. The Black Soul Stone, an artifact capable of containing the Lords of Hell, was in play. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could bring disaster to Sanctuary. The battle against Hell had begun again, but this time, Tyrael was not the one who would stand against it. That role belonged to the Nephilim, a mortal warrior unlike any before. Tyrael had fought demons for ages, but never before had he known fear. Now, as a man watching as Diablo prepared to unleash his full power upon the high heavens, he finally understood it. Diablo had become something greater than ever before. With the power of all 7 evils contained within the Black Soul Stone, he transformed into the Prime. His goal was clear. He would bring ruin to the high heavens. He tore through the Diamond Gates, leading an assault unlike anything the angels had ever faced. The very heart of heaven, the Crystal Arch, was now his target. The Anger's Council had fought demons for ages, but they had never seen one of this strength. Tyrael, standing amongst the angels he had once called brothers, felt something unfamiliar, helplessness. As an archangel, he had always known his purpose. Now, as a mortal, he could not stand against Diablo's power. Imperius, the greatest warrior of heaven, tried to stop the prime evil, but he was wounded and cast aside. The angels fell, their light extinguished as Diablo corrupted the very realm they had sworn to protect. Tyrael questioned himself. Had he made the wrong choice? Had his trust in humanity brought about this destruction? He had once seen fear in the eyes of mortals. Now, for the first time, he understood it. But hope remained. The Nephilim, that's you, by the way, the mortal warrior who had fought against the Lords of Hell, pressed forward. Tyrael guided them through the burning halls of heaven, offering what wisdom he could. Together, they freed Oriel, the Archangel of Hope, restoring some of heaven's strength. The battle led them to the Silver Spire, the final path to the Crystal Arch. Imperius, still unwilling to see humanity as an ally, blocked their way. But the fight between them did not last. As Diablo reached the Ark, his corruption spread, rendering even Imperius hopeless, powerless. Only the Nephilim could stop him. Tyrael watched as the final battle unfolded. He could not fight alongside them, but he knew that if they failed, heaven itself would fall. The clash was fierce, but against all odds, Diablo was struck down. His essence was cast from the heavens, and the Black Soul Stone was lost. The high heavens had been saved, but they were forever changed. The realm that once stood untouched by corruption had been scarred. Tyrael looked upon his angelic kin and saw what he had feared. He was just no longer one of them. He had walked amongst mortals, suffered as they had, and seen the strength they carried. Heaven had always judged humanity from afar, but Tyrael had lived as one of them. He could not return to what he was before. And so, as the Angerist Council gathered once more, Tyrael made a choice. He would rejoin them, but not as the aspect of justice. He had come to understand that wisdom, not judgment, was what heaven needed now. He would stand as the Archangel of Wisdom, the bridge between heaven and sanctuary. But even as he took his place once more, one thought remained. Had heaven truly been saved, or was the greatest threat yet to come? Tyrael had reclaimed his place on the Angerist Council as the Archangel of Wisdom by this point, a role once held by Malfeld before his disappearance. It was a position of guidance, not action, and Tyrael soon realized how much had changed, both in heaven and within himself. As a mortal, he just no longer fit amongst the angels. The constant light of the high heavens no longer felt like home. He needed sleep, but found no place to rest. When he did, his dreams were troubled. Those who had perished during Diablo's invasion haunted him. He saw their faces in the halls of heaven, blaming him for what had happened. He had fought for them, for sanctuary, yet now he felt like an outsider amongst his own kind. But something deeper disturbed him. He noticed a darkness creeping into the heart of heaven. The harmony of the crystal arch, which gave form to all angels, was tainted. He traced his source to the Black Soulstone. The Anger's Council had retrieved the artifact after Diablo's fall. It still held the essence of the great evils, but now it was doing something else. It was affecting the angels themselves. Those who spent time near it became more aggressive, more clouded in judgment. Tyrael warned his brothers and sisters that the Soulstone was a threat, but his concerns were dismissed. Imperius, as always, saw his words as weakness. He blamed Tyrael for Diablo's attack and for endangering creation by destroying the Worldstone. Auriel, though compassionate, was uncertain of the right course of action. Then the debate turned to humanity. Imperius demanded a revote on the fate of Sanctuary. He had wanted them destroyed once before, and now, after seeing what the Nephilim had done, he wished to erase them again. In his mind, they were just too powerful, and Tyrael stood against him. For the first time, Tyrael was truly alone. He had no allies on this council. Imperius accused him of cowardice, of clinging on to his mortal weaknesses. When Tyrael refused to back down, Imperius drew his weapon, daring him to fight, but Tyrael did not. He left the chamber, knowing that no words would change their minds. He needed to act. Seeking answers, he traveled to the Pools of Wisdom, a sacred place once watched over by Malthael. There he gazed into Shaladar, the Chalice of Wisdom. It showed him what he feared most. The Black Soulstone would bring ruin. Not just to heaven, but to all creation. It could not stay in heaven. The only solution was to take it. Tyrael knew the council would never let him remove it willingly. He could not do this alone. He thought of the Heradrim, the ancient order of mortals who had once stood against the prime evils. They were gone. Then he remembered Deckard Cain's writings. Cain had spoken of a group known as the First Ones, scholars who had sought to rebuild what was lost. They would be the foundation of a new Heradrim, a brotherhood not of angels but of mortals. And so Tyrael made his choice. He would steal the Black Soulstone from heaven itself. He would place it in the hands of those who would guard it, who could understand it. He would entrust humanity with a task that heaven refused to take on. As he left the high heavens, he knew there was no turning back. He had been justice. He had become wisdom. But now, for the first time, he was simply a man making a choice. At this point, Tyrael had abandoned the high heavens, but not his duty. If the Anger's Council would not act, he would. The Black Soulstone, still brimming with the essence of the great evils, was too dangerous to remain in heaven. He needed to place it where it would be guarded, far from the reach of demons or angels. And, as I've just mentioned, he turned to humanity. The new Heradrim had a singular purpose: to retrieve the Black Soulstone from the heavens and hide it where no angel or demon could find it. Tyrael led them to Kandurus, where he told them of Sanctuary's true origins, the war between heaven and hell, the creation of the Worldstone, and the sacrifice that had spared humanity. He spoke of the prime evils, the Heradrim's victories, and the Soulstones that had once imprisoned them. The Black Soulstone, however, was something different. It had not been made by angels, but by man, and it had power that even the heavens feared. To retrieving the Black Soulstone was not easy. The group traveled to Bramwell, where they sought guidance from Borad Nar, a man who had uncovered Zakharum's secrets. They fought demons along the way, proving their strength as a team, but Tyrael had doubts. He saw the struggles of mortality, hunger, exhaustion, and fear. He knew they could not afford failure. Through Borad, they learned of Corvus, an ancient city lost to time. It was there that the Heradrim could hide the Soulstone. But first, they had to reach Westmarch. As they moved, Tyrael sensed something else. The high heavens were not blind to his plans. The Sicarii, an elite force of angels, had been sent to stop him. The same warriors he had once trained were now his enemies. When they finally clashed, Tyrael found himself at a disadvantage. As a mortal, he was no match for an angel. But his companions fought alongside him, forcing the Sicarii to retreat. The journey to Westmarch took its toll. Tyrael carried the weight of his decision, knowing he could never return to heaven. But there was no time for regret. They entered the city under cover, making contact with the Knights of Westmarch. There they learned what Tyrael had feared. The corruption of the Black Soul Stone was already spreading even in the heavens. Its influence had grown. If they did not act soon, it would be too late. They could not wait. The Horadrim prepared for their mission. Tyrael opened a portal, and together they stepped into the high heavens once more. It was time to steal the Black Soul Stone. But before they could, another force had already set its eyes upon it. Tyrael, the Archangel of Death, had returned. Tyrael had been absent for centuries. Once the Archangel of Wisdom, he had vanished after the destruction of the World Stone, retreating into silence. Now he had returned, but he was no longer wisdom. He had become death. He saw humanity not as a force of balance, but as a disease. To him, the blood of demons ran through every mortal's veins. If the war between heaven and hell was to end, he believed there was only one solution: eradicate humanity entirely. Tyrael and the Horadrim had hidden the Black Soul Stone beneath Westmarch, hoping to keep it from the hands of those who sought its power. But Tyrael was already watching. Before the others could act, he struck. Tyrael and his Horadrim fought to defend the vaults, but it was not a battle they could win. Tyrael's forces swept through the city, reaping the souls of mortals. His death maidens twisted the land, draining the life from those who stood in their way. The people of Westmarch were powerless. Tyrael himself stood against his former brother, but he was no match for what Tyrael had become. Death had no interest in words. The Reaper of Souls swatted him aside as if he were nothing. His scythe tore into Tyrael, yet his soul remained untouched. Tyrael took the Black Soul Stone and disappeared. His plan was unknown, but one thing was certain: he would not stop until all of humanity was wiped from existence. Tyrael, wounded and weakened, could not stand against him. But there was still one hope. He sent Lorath Nar to find the Nephilim. Once before, the Nephilim had stood against the prime evil and prevailed. Now, Tyrael prayed that they could do the same against death itself. Tyrael's war on humanity had begun. The Reapers flooded Westmarch, consuming the souls of the living, leaving only silence in their wake. Tyrael fought alongside the Nephilim and the remnants of the city's defenders, but the battle was already lost. The people of Sanctuary were not facing an army, they were facing the end. Tyrael had taken the stone to Pandemonium, the ancient fortress that had once stood at the center of the eternal conflict. There, he planned to use its power to consume all demonic essence in existence, but in doing so, he would also destroy humanity. Mortals were born from both angels and demons. To erase one side was to erase them entirely. Tyrael and the Nephilim traveled to the Pandemonium Gate, only to find it under siege by Tyrael's Reapers. They fought their way through, cutting down the Death Maidens that guarded the way. As the last of the enemy forces fell, another figure arrived, Imperius. The leader of the Angerus Council had never cared for humanity, but even he understood the danger Tyrael posed. He would not fight for mortals, but he would not stand aside while death consumed all. Without another word, he opened the way forward, allowing the Nephilim to enter the heart of the storm. Tyrael followed, guiding them to the fortress where Tyrael waited. He had seen the power the Nephilim wielded, had fought alongside them against the forces of hell. But this was different. Tyrael was no demon. He was something else entirely. The gates of Pandemonium Fortress were breached, and Tyrael gave the Nephilim one final warning. To defeat death, they would have to embrace it. The battle that followed was unlike any before. Tyrael wielded the power of the dead, striking with a force that neither angel nor demon had ever possessed. But the Nephilim endured. They fought through the waves of spirits past the remnants of the ancient war and faced death itself. And then, it was over. The Black Soul Stone was destroyed. Tyrael was no more. The Reapers fell silent. Sanctuary had been saved once again. But something was different. Tyrael looked upon the Nephilim, the mortal who had bested Diablo, who had stood against the primeval and now struck down death itself. This was no ordinary hero. This was something far greater, stronger than any angel, more powerful than any demon. And for the first time, Tyrael questioned what he had helped create. The Nephilim had been humanity's protector, but what if, one day, they chose to rule instead? What could stop them then? Tyrael had fought alongside angels and mortals. He had stood against the primevals, cast down death itself, and reshaped the fate of Sanctuary. He had been justice, he had been wisdom. But what was he now? For years after Tyrael's defeat, he guided the Horadrim, watching over Sanctuary from the shadows. He sent the Nephilim where they were needed, advising them as new threats arose. But with each passing day, doubt grew. The Nephilim had become something beyond his understanding, beyond his control. They had surpassed even the mightiest of angels. And then he left. There was no battle, no final mission, no farewell. One day he simply walked away. He left Lorath Nar in charge of the Horadrim. But without its founder, the order would not remain the same. Some believed he had seen something, some great danger on the horizon, too vast to speak of. Others thought he had grown tired of war, that he had finally chosen peace. No one knows where he went. Perhaps he watches from afar, waiting for the day he is needed again. Perhaps he has found rest at last. Or perhaps the one who once carried the weight of justice had simply vanished, leaving the future to unfold without him. And that's the story of Tyrael. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. And if you like this, please subscribe and like the video. It means a lot. This one was a bit more work than usual. It's a really big one. So I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, have a good one, and we'll see you in the next one.